just tell us briefly some of the issues that you've encountered within the church connected to the work that you do.
Some of the problems we've had with
well, I'm sure you've had both positive and negative. How do you find that people respond to the work that you do, and is there any kind of pattern behind that response, like certain denominations, for instance?
The Christian church is a huge mosaic, as you well know. So there have been enormous differences in responses depending on which culture you're in. Whenever I'm a polemicist, and maybe we need to define that. What is a polemicist?
So a polemicist is someone who makes a critical argument of another worldview. So when I argue against Islam and I critique Islam from its text or its sources, that's a polemic.
It's the offense. Apologetics is defense.
Yeah.
Like a football team.
Absolutely.
You have your offense, your strikers, you have your defense, who defend the goal. And we are good at offense, but we're hopeless at polemics when it comes to Islam, because there's just no school of polemics.
Yeah.
I think I have the only doctorate in the world on Islamic polemics. The first, I hope, of many that will be coming. Now, what's fascinating is when I use polemics in Europe especially, and most especially here in Britain, I get attacked. Almost always by Christians.
What kind of Christians are attacking you?
Mostly the Anglican Church.
The Anglican Church. What are they saying?
Well, here in Britain, since you're from Britain and we're in Britain, there is really only one narrative in missiological circles within the church, and not just the Anglican Church, also with other the denominations, and that is that we are to use what they call the friendship model or the grace method, they call it.
Yeah.
The grace method, which starts from the premise that you make friends first, and in order to make friends, you do not confront. So you would never criticize the Qur'an, you would never criticize Muhammad, you never criticize Allah, and you never criticize Muslims. Now, except for that last one, Muslims, I'm not here to criticize Muslims. I would like to know whose agenda that is.
Yeah.
Certainly not agenda, and it's certainly not what I see in the Bible with Jesus Christ. He was very critical, or Paul, especially Paul, but even starting with Jesus, did he not criticize? Did he not confront the Pharisees? Did he not overturn the tables? In fact, a lot of his ministry, whenever he engaged with non-believers, was very confrontational. Paul is a better example, exact good example. Look at chapter 17 to 19 of Acts, and you will see in every place he went, whether it is Laodicea, Cappadocia, Berea, or Ephesus, he went right in the synagogues and confronted the Pharisees with what they had done to the Messiah.
But I think, talking about the agenda, I think probably what is happening is that a liberal politic is affecting the theology of the church, rather than the theology of the church affecting its politic.
Yep.
And what we're seeing here is, because there's nothing wrong in and of itself with the friendship model, but it can't.
Can I stop you there?
No, I'm going to finish my point, and then you can come back on me. There is an issue with a church culture that has no apologetics and no polemics, because relationships work within wider dynamics within society. And Islam is fiercely critical of the Christian faith, very willing to defend its own, and there are levels and degrees on how successfully it does that. So if you invite someone to enter into a friendship with a Muslim who's prepared with polemics and prepared with good apologetics, and they have nothing at all, that's like sending a sheep to be slaughtered. It gives all the advantages to the opposition.
Absolutely, but I want to just back you up onto your claim. There's nothing wrong with starting with friendship. First of all, can you find any verse in the Bible that supports that?
Yes. I think when you look at Christ and how he interacted with people.
Give me an example. Where did he make a friend first?
The woman at the well.
Did he not confront her almost immediately before he made a friend with her?
It's true that story is based upon Christ confronting. But
where's the friendship there?
But in terms of human relationships, in terms of looking at the scriptures and reading them as real accounts of real people in history, it's clear that friendships had dynamics within what was happening.
Where did they start with friendship first? That's all I'm asking. Give me an example.
Well, I think for example, when Peter and his brothers heard about the Lord Jesus Christ, their relationship, one pulled in the other. Let's go and follow him. You know,
where did the disciples, Peter and James and others, where did they then go and start making friends before they preached the gospel?
I think it's just there within human nature. I think
So you can't give me an example of creating friends first, having friendship before you introduce the gospel. You haven't been able to give me one example yet.
Hold on. I think within the very nature of the subtext, it is understood that relationships formed in which people were able to communicate the gospel.
Listen,
I'm not here to defend friendship evangelism as being the only way. I'm just pointing out that I don't think insofar as it goes there's anything wrong with it, but it doesn't go far enough.
I'm going to show you where it's wrong. We're friends.
Yeah.
If I had an agenda in my friendship, is that not deceitful to begin with? If I don't really care of you, Bob, just because you are a great guy,
yeah,
and I just want to be your friend, if my agenda was I want to convert you, is that a real friendship?
No, that's not a real friendship.
And what if you found out that I actually I wanted to make you a good old evangelical Mennonite, pacifist, and that's the only reason I made my friendship with you.
It wouldn't be a genuine friendship.
No. And after you found out that was my intent,
but that's not the friendship.
Let me finish. After you found out that was my intention, what would you think of me?
Oh, I'd think less of you.
And also, you probably think that I was deceitful.
Yes.
Is that not what friendship evangelism is all about?
No,
finish. When you hear it from every group that does it, not you, I'm not saying you, Bob, but almost any time it's taught in any mission school or any Bible school, go and make friends first so that you can preach the gospel. Because let me finish, the only reason you're in that country is to preach the gospel so they can come home.
The friendship evangelism, because I started off with friendship evangelism. I started off that way. And I don't want this to be a debate about friendship evangelism versus some other kind of evangelism, because that's not the main aim of this conversation, but it's a point that's worth delving into a little. When I was first introduced into friendship evangelism, the thing that was drilled into me is to establish a genuine friendship. And then later, because friendships are organic, because they're natural, and because you are a Christian and that is at the very core of who you are, that naturally within the dynamics of a friendship, that then you would communicate the gospel over. When I was introduced to friendship evangelism, what was taught was that the friendship had to be genuine. In other words, it had to be based upon a human interacting with a human before it was a Christian interacting with a Muslim. And then, because one is a human Christian and one is a human Muslim, discussion about faith would come later.
Rather than continue to with the point, I would say forget this friendship first. Why don't you just say gospel first?
Yeah.
Once you go right up to a person, look, I love what Hutton does when she goes into mosques here. She goes right into the mosque. The first thing she says, she goes right up to the leader. She always finds where the leader is. She says, I believe the Bible is the Word of God. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. I believe Jesus died on the cross. Let's talk about it.
Yep.
Bingo. Now why don't we all do that?
But coming back to, because we'll segue that, we'll put that to one side for a second. Coming back to the relationship between the church and its relationship to Islam. One of the problems that I see with a lack of apologetics and polemics is partly because in terms of human dynamics, if say you're trying to make me a Mennonite, and I've got no understanding of the Mennonite position, I've got no rebuttals to the Mennonite arguments, and you're equipped with a whole bunch of arguments against an ecumenical Christian like me. Yeah, you can criticize ecumenicalism all the way down. Yeah, and you're able to defend the Mennonite position. When we actually start interacting about our different positions, who's going to win that argument? Who's going to win that?
The one with all the ammunition.
The one with all the ammunition.
So you're saying let's get the ammunition.
The church has to be equipped.
And I absolutely agree. We shake on that.
Yeah,
but
totally.
here's another problem. Have you noticed? Maybe you haven't noticed this. Most people who've been called by God into the Muslim world tend to be very timid, shy, and have a personality trait that is conducive to friendship evangelism.
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay, take it from my experience, almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And it was very rare to find people like you or me. Remember, I was here 25 years trying to find someone to replace me on the ladder. In 25 years, I couldn't find one man to do that until you came along, and lo and behold, you came on after I left. Shame on you. A week after I left, for
I
it to be exact.
think that was God's timing, not yours. But I think that comes to a much bigger problem.
Let me just finish what I'm saying.
Go on.
So my whole point is, I would suggest that the whole context of friendship evangelism, grace evangelism has been created following the personalities of the people who are doing the work. And you tend to gravitate to that methodology that fits your personality. It doesn't fit your personality, Bob. It doesn't fit Hattun's personality. It doesn't fit my personality. We are very much like Paul's, are we not?
I suppose.
People always tell me that. They call Hattun the Pauline. She's a Pauline, you're a Paul. And in a sense, we have a personality that is much more conducive to Muslim evangelism, because the majority of Muslims that you and I have contact with, the most radical Muslims, tend to be very aggressive, anything but timid, love to argue, love to debate, have done their homework, have really engaged with it. So when they come and they meet these timid Christians, they overwhelm them, but they don't overwhelm you.
No.
Why is it they don't overwhelm you? Because you engage at that level. You, even though you may not know the material firsthand, your favorite, when I started this, my favorite phrase was, give me a week. Well, that gives me a week to learn the answer.
Yep.
And then you learn your apologetics. But then I always want to go one step and say, now let me take the same question and put them right back to you.
Yes.
So you don't have a fear of doing that.
No.
Yet in almost every Christian circle, you're not permitted to critique the Quran, critique Muhammad, critique Allah, or critique the very things we should be critiquing.
And I think that there needs to be a discussion within Christian fellowships around why we've got to that place. And I would put it, I think that it comes from two things. I think firstly, it's because the Enlightenment emasculated the church and reduced the church to a series of rituals and Sunday observance that reduced it from being this dynamic way of life that would allow a man to be a man in the fullest sense. And so when there is that masculine energy of wanting to defend your community, to stand up for what's right, to stand against what's wrong, to stand up against the enemy of your community, those that are attacking your community, to defend justice, it involves being political about a religious identity, which is an anathema to the Enlightenment. And so for the church to fit in with the Enlightenment, it had to exercise that energy, and so it effeminized the faith and emphasized the idea of compassion and gentleness and the idea of healing and the idea of building people up, which are all notable, worthy things. But the moment you do that, the men start to leave the church, and the church currently has more women than men. The other problem,
Except in Africa.
the other problem is that as well as that, I think there is political pressure in modern Western states to try and keep things calm, to try and keep things steady, not to rock the boat, not to pit one community against another, not to buy into this idea of rivalries within society, because we're all meant to just get along. And for the church to fit into those political pressures, it has had to create a theology that goes along with what the Enlightenment is saying. That's where I think the issue is.
And I think you're perfectly right, and I would agree with you. There's nothing I can really disagree with you. I would just say let's take it one step further, get outside of Europe, where that is very much the narrative.
Yeah.
America is a little bit different. We're not at that narrative yet. We just do know what a men are still
they take responsibility,
idolized as being strong, forthright, and upright, and that's why you have the ugly American ideal, where we tend to be more brash than Europeans. Look, we all got fed up with Europe and moved to America. All of us, every one of our families have moved. If you move, because that means you already are creative. Already you are willing to leave that which is traditional.
take an adventure.
There you go. And so we have a whole gene pool of people like that. So we are different than Europeans. But I find fascinating, because I travel all over the world, that whenever I go and confront a Muslims, the people who come and want to shake my hand after Speaker's Corner are never English. They tend to be Egyptians, they tend to be Indonesians, they tend to be Africans, they tend to be anybody but Europeans, because in those cultures, it's okay for a man to be a man, but more than that, they are being engulfed by Islam. Places like Indonesia, India, where now the second largest Muslim country on earth, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, coming out of North Africa. I was just in Togo and Ghana last year, where the entire northern part of both those countries have become Islamic in just one generation. 500 pastors, 400 raised their hands, says, we need this material, we want apologetics, we want polemics, because we want to see Islam stop. That you don't hear coming out of Europe.
I mean, the very narrative that you've said about, we want to see Islam stopped. If you say that publicly, as you just have, lots of people, because of the way that we've been formed in Western liberal European society, lots of people, the only box that they can fit that into is radical extremism. That's the only box that they've got, because people interpret the world through the categories of mind that the narrative of their society gives them. So if their society gives them a narrative that rivalry is bad, that standing up for your community is wrong, for having an idea that your community is not just your geographical area, but some kind of your religious community, these ideas are all anathema to the Enlightenment. And thus the categories of mind that those kind of language that you just described go into are bad categories, bad boxes. Yeah. And what's happened is too many Christians have brought the liberal, secular, progressive society into the church, rather than allowing their categories of mind to be formed by the apostolic teaching.
And when you look at the book of Acts, and when you look at the disciples, when you look at Jesus Christ, especially Paul, that's why you brought him up, you don't have that enlightened viewpoint there. In fact, you see a very robust, confrontational, most even so confrontational, that look at the commissioning in chapter 10 of Jesus to the disciples. What does he say to those he's commissioning, the 12 disciples? I'm sending you out as lamb before wolves. He promises them 5 things. You're going to be hated, you're going to be persecuted for my name, you're going to be jailed, you're going to be flogged, you're going to be killed, of which every disciple fulfilled. All 12, except for John, all 12 disciples were hated, they were all persecuted, they were all put in jail, they were all flogged, and every one of them was killed. Only John survived a peaceful death. That commissioning is your commissioning. That's my commissioning. I have not come to bring peace. I've come to bring the sword. To set father against son, mother against daughter. That means your whole family is going to use a sword against you.
And yet you've got bishops saying exactly the opposite.
Exactly.
You've got this. There was that vicar up in the north of England recently who, to do a joint celebration of the Itfar meal, decided she was going to cover up the crosses and the crucifixes to accommodate. So you've got Christians in China who are literally standing in front of the police and saying, send me to prison, I won't cover up the cross, I won't take down the cross. And they're standing there with the cross in these protests against the might of the Chinese state, with all the horror that can come with. And then in England, you have this effeminized Church of England that's saying, well, we don't want to offend, so we'll cover up the cross.
Well, Bob, listen, I'm letting you do that. I've left Europe now. I've spent 25 of my years trying to get people changed. They didn't change. I've now said, it's not that I've given up on Europe. I'm still here today. What I have decided is that the people that I need to work with are the Africans. I really feel the Africans are going to stop Islam. They still have a backbone that we don't have in Europe. Or the Indians. I love the Indians.
Or the Eastern Europeans.
Interestingly, I just came from Poland last week. In Poland, I did this talk that we recorded earlier to about 700 leaders from all over Europe.
Yeah.
When I was introduced, the man that introduced me was a Romanian, Eastern European.
Yeah.
He said, some of you are not going to like what Jay is going to say. Some of you are going to like what he's going to say. He is like Marmite. You either hate him or love him. There's no in between. So he prepared the crowd before I got there.
Yeah.
At the end of it, we went to the piano bar, and there were little pockets of people that were talking. And Hatun, some people came to her. They were quite concerned. They said, Hatun, what? This is terrible what Jay has said. This is wrong. This is not Christ-like. They were all British.
What were they objecting to specifically? Was it
because I was confronting? I was so confrontational.
So polemics.
Polemic. I was using polemics, and I was saying, "This is what we're going to do." In fact, I even said we're going to be doing this yesterday at Speaker's Corner. I said we're going to actually take these variants and expose them to the whole world. An Indonesian walks by, stops next to where Hatun is saying. He says, "No, no, no, no! This is exactly what we need in Indonesia. We need this material in Indonesia. If only Jay would come to Indonesia and teach us this."
Yeah.
In front of those British. So Hatun didn't say anything. She just let him speak. Hatun then came and told me the story. We were sitting there, and 2 Europeans came who were both here, were studying here in Britain. Interestingly, they were Eastern Europeans studying in Britain. They were quite concerned with what I just said. But they were polite about it. They wanted to talk to me about it. They didn't talk behind my back. They actually came to me. God bless them. And I didn't have to say anything. I let Hatu take them on.
Yeah.
When they said this is not Christ-like, this kind of methodology. This is not pleasing to Christ. We should not be confronting him. I just let Hatu just looked at them and says, how many people have you brought to the Lord? How many Muslims have you talked to? How many Muslims would ever listening to this kind of compliant methodology? The only way to deal with radical Muslims and with almost any Muslim concerning who God is, who the prophetic line is, whether Jesus is the Son of God, is you're going to have to confront them, because the gospel by definition is confrontational. Anytime you say that God entered time and space, that's going to confront a Muslim. Anytime you say that God died on the cross, that's going to confront a Muslim. Anytime you say that God has a son, that's confrontational. And you have to say it, she says. You have to begin with it. You don't have to earn the right to say it. You don't make a friend first before you say it.
And many, many Muslims would not be offended by a confrontation, so long as it was done in the right spirit. If it was done in the spirit of robust dialogue and conversation, they're not going to be... most Muslims would not then go and be offended by that. They would engage you, because many of them come from a culture where robust debate and discussion is quite a normal thing, and they pass time in debate about politics and about religion and about philosophy.
And it gets very heated.
And it can get very heated. Yeah.
I said to these two Europeans just before they left, I said, "Now, do you realize what I did there in the plenary? I talked to the camera, because I said from the very beginning, I'm talking to you Muslims because I know most of you are going to watch this. There are going to be thousands of Muslims who watch this. They always do whenever I talk there at ELF. And I said, you are going to take this video down and you're going to try to get I want you to, rather than just sit there and criticize, I want you to answer the questions I'm throwing at you." They were bothered by that I was being so direct to the Muslims. I said, listen, that really wasn't for you. That was for them. I'm not interested in you. I'm not here to convince Europeans, because you're not Muslims.
Shall I put it to you that there's another dimension to why the church is so weak? It's because it's populated and dominated by, its leadership is populated and dominated by middle-class people who've had a comfortable life. It's populated and dominated by people who don't know what it means to have to stand up for yourself. And there's a reason why there's a
Well, one step further, it's also one more thing that I would add. I would agree with everything you're saying, but one more step. It's also populated by people that love to be loved.
Yeah.
They are so scared of being hated. They are so scared of being politically incorrect.
They think that the cross was actually, when Christ said, "Pick up your cross and follow me every day," they think that the cross is actually just a metaphor for a cushion.
Okay.
As opposed to a dying to oneself.
Put a picture of the cushion up there and put it in front of the cross.
Yeah.
But can you see what I'm saying? There is such a desire to be loved anymore in the church. We are so scared of being disliked.
Well, I think
that's exactly what Christ says we have to do.
I think what we're looking at is one of the things that really annoys me about evangelism in the Western church is the gimmickiness of it. You know, like messy church and things like that. The gimmickness of the way that we do church in the West screams out to me that what we have lost is the sense of that we are a community with a purpose and a mission and an identity that gives rise to a politics.
Yeah.
And one of the great disadvantages, and I don't know, and I'm asking you to comment on your thoughts on this, one of the great disadvantages that the church faces is that there isn't a coherent political narrative that emerges from a Christian identity that Christians all are working to. Whereas within Islam there is this narrative that Islam will dominate. And that is something that Muslims can tap into.
Yes and no. I would agree with you that the narrative in Christianity is very much that. I would suggest that there is a similar discussion happening within Islam.
Go on.
This idea of domination is really coming from the radical, the right, which is fascinating because the vast majority of Muslims that come here to Europe are not part of that.
No, agreed.
Initially.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm saying initially.
Yeah.
They come here for jobs, they come here for education, they come here really almost in many cases to get away from Islam. Now what you're finding is this first wave that comes in is coming with a huge disillusionment of Islam. They do not want to dominate, they actually want to get away from it. This is the best wave to work with because they still want to believe in God, they still want to believe in a prophetic line and in scripture, which we have and we can give them. Why aren't we doing it? Nonetheless, what tends to happen, and this is what you'll find the longer here, this is what we've seen in the last 25 years of living here in London, is that the second generation either go one of two ways. They grow up as British people, they grow up very much along the same mindset, they love to go to dances, they love to go to the bar, they love to do pub hopping, but that's not given, that's not permitted in their own communities. So they either step away from their own communities, which means they step away from all those social connections that have given them their identity up to now. And when they step away, they have to go home back to their own countries. They go back to Pakistan, they go back to India and Bangladesh. Those are the three countries that dominate here in Britain. When they go home, they realize that what in Europe and what's at home are diametrically different. So they have a crisis of identity when they get back to Britain. Everything's in array, everything's in disarray, everything's uta-puta, and they're so much further behind economically and certainly technologically. And they say, well, wait a minute, where am I going to get my identity from? Now, I saw this happening in the 1990s, and in 1993, a guy came to account named Sheikh Umma Muhammad, started Muhajirin Party. When I was going to these Islamic societies, organizations they had listed on the bulletin boards, I was the only white man there, certainly the only non-Muslim that would show up in these groups. School of Oriental Study, King's College, London School of Economics, Imperial College. I went to as many as I could, and I noticed there was only about 20 or 30 men and women in these groups until he came on the campus. When he came on the campus, suddenly they jumped to 200 to 300. And what was he saying? Three things. The West is in decline. Morally, spiritually, economically, which is true. And he had lots of statistics to back him up. Yep. Breakdown of the family, drugs here, one-parent families there. Yep. Look at all the discord. Look at all this usury they're using.
The fruit of liberal
number two,
thought.
he said, the reason for this is because of a corrupted scripture, because this is all a Christian organ. It's a Christian memory. He didn't call it a Christian nation, but it's all based on the Bible, and the Bible's been corrupted. Therefore, if the West is in decline, Christianity is to blame. Where's the solution? Islam. Why? Because we teach you how to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep. Every area of life, 24/7, is dictated by Islam. And if you follow Islam, you will not have problem with your family. You will not have problem with corruption. There will not be any pornography. You will not have any difficulty with usury. And you just name boom, 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 boom. These Muslims were listening to this and they say, yes, that's what I need. And suddenly these guys were starting to wear the dress, they started wearing the tokens, they started growing out their beards. Suddenly their trousers started to come up, these high heels, why? And they started brushing their teeth with little twigs because that's what Muhammad did.
I think.
Did you see what I'm saying? You either go one of two directions.
I would actually disagree with that. I think that the panorama within the Islamic community, I think that's too much of an oversimplification, though I understand why you say that.
Can I give you statistics to back up what you said?
Allow me to reply. Like in terms of Pew Research, for instance, there's a much greater diversity within the Islamic community between liberal, reformist Muslims that make up a tiny minority, cultural Muslims who make a huge swathe of Islam, people who practice it in much the same way as a Christian, cultural Christian might go to church for weddings, baptisms and funerals. There's many cultural Muslims who connect with their faith purely at the cultural matrix. Then you've got more conservative Muslims who have a more practice of their faith, but it will be refined and limited to greater or lesser degrees by how conservative they are. Then it moves into traditionalism, which is much more separatist, much more going along the road of, but not yet there, towards the radical fanaticism. And then from the traditionalists, you have radicals who then subdivide again into militant and non-militant. And within that diversity, when I was talking about the political narrative within Islam, What I'm saying is that when you read the Qur'an and when you read the Hadith, there is this assumption that Islam is going to win. And so when a Muslim taps into that narrative, that's the narrative that they're engaging with. They are working to win because they believe that they will win. Whereas lots of Christians either don't believe that their faith can connect with politics at all, believe that the enemy is meant to win and persecute us, believe that that when we do connect with politics, what we're really connecting with is things like solidarity with the poor and no one else. A tiny minority believe in theology that could sort of be summarized like the idea of taking territory, the idea of dominion theology, of claiming territory and influence on society.
Where are the statistics to back up? I'm just getting.
Pew research.
I would agree.
Pew
Okay.
research.
What did Pew Research do in the Clarion Project? Have you seen their latest statistics?
Go on.
Okay. Let's back up first and let's show what they did after 9/11. Following 9/11, they asked this very question: do you support Al Qaeda? And they went Q News, which is no longer existing, but that was the Islamic magazine, and The Guardian, asked this question to 10,000 Muslims living in Britain following 9/11, about a month later, October 2001. And they asked this question you just asked: do you support Al Qaeda? Do you support this agenda on the right that we should use violence to eradicate the enemies? Or do you really don't really read scripture, you have heard scripture, but you don't really understand these guys, you don't really support them, but you don't sit there and denigrate them? Or have you just left scripture behind and you completely walked away from it? They found 15% supported Al Qaeda, 70%, like you're saying, was in the middle, who didn't support either side. They really didn't have an opinion, but they were concerned, and the last 15% was liberals. That was in 2001. In 2002, Q News redid the same, almost a year later, they redid the exact same questionnaire. And then they found this group over here on the right was 25%, all taken from the middle. In 2006, The Guardian picked it up and did the question again. Now this is a year after the bombings here in London. So they asked one other question: do you support the bombings that happened here in London? This group that had been 15% had grown to 25% in Britain, and now grown to 43% by 2006.
I'm not aware of that particular study. I do know that...
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Then they asked, what about the suicide bombings that had just happened a year later? 20% of all Muslims that answered the questionnaire, again, you might say there's a plus or minus 4 to 3%, is what they say, supported the suicide bombings. Now, they wanted to, after that, they stopped because it was so troubling, and it was all the Times brought it up, many other magazines brought it up, said, what in the world is going on with the Muslims in Britain? How could 15% have grown to 43% in just 5 years? What's going on here? Well, I knew what was going on here. They didn't ask me.
Yeah.
I saw it happening at Speaker's Corner. I saw it happening on the university campuses. Almost every Muslim that I was talking to was going back to scripture to find out how to answer these problems. And what would you do when you feel threatened? You go back to the Bible as well, don't you?
Well, I think I certainly know that Channel 4, there's a guy, I forget his name now, probably should have looked him up before I got into this conversation. He's a famous sociologist, not a famous sociologist, he's worked in government, he's an establishment figure, he's very respected in our society, and he with a group commissioned this study that then Channel 4 did this whole documentary on, where they did one of the largest surveys of Muslims' opinions in the UK, and they found a shocking, and I think it came after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and they found a shocking number, a percentage. It wasn't a majority by any means, but it was way higher than anyone would have hoped.
Was it about 50%?
No. I think it was around 20% actually of Muslims that believe that if you insulted the Prophet Muhammad, violence was legitimized against you. The point that I'm driving towards, because statistics will show different things, is that within the Muslim community, there is a political narrative at work. There are those that are pushing a political narrative that Islam has to win. Okay, it doesn't represent all Muslims, but there's a lot of Muslims that are chiming into this at different degrees. And some of those Muslims, a very tiny minority, then go on to do horrendous things with that. But there's nothing.
Can we just
in terms
that one
of,
phrase right there?
In terms of the Christian Church, there is confusion about how to respond. There isn't a clear leading from the church about how to respond. And actually, some of the biggest voices in the church, some of the leading figures in the church, the bishops, are actually just coming out with a liberal, progressive political narrative that has no connection to our Christian identity or any intent
right
to
there,
to
that phrase, liberal, no connection to our history. What are you referring to there? Define what you mean by they're liberal from in contrasting to what? That there are no attachment in contrasting. What are there not attachment to?
In the idea that the church is a historical community that has existed for 2,000 years. It has its own history that is you can read. It has its own values which we can define. It has its own beliefs which we can define.
And where does that definition come from for those beliefs, those values, and those?
Ultimately, it comes from the apostolic teaching of which the scriptures is a
comes
composite.
back to the book.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at least we can agree upon that. And the reason I emphasize that is because almost every Muslim doesn't talk about this great tradition of the Umma. They don't talk about the Ottomans. They always go back to the Qur'an. And yet this has been the case in your discussions at Speaker's Corner. They go back to the book even more so than we go back to the book.
Yeah.
They go back, though they haven't read it.
Well, most of them can't read it.
They don't ever bring it to the corner with them. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Have you seen one Quran at the corner?
A few. Not
by,
many.
By Muslims?
A few, but not many.
I've never seen a Muslim with a Quran. We have the Qurans. And they're always trying to borrow our Qurans. And I don't give them because then they usually run away from them. I've lost so many Qurans at the corner because they want to get it away from me.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is they quote it all the time. And I said, where is that? Well, I don't know. It's somewhere in the Quran. It's like Tevye. Somewhere in the Bible it talks about chickens.
Yeah.
You know, if you fit it on the roof. It's that kind of mentality. They know it's there. They know it's there. And they know that they have to find it there because this is the foundation for everything they believe. And it is there. But I know it better than they do. So this whole narrative of control, this narrative of slaying the unbeliever wherever you find them, cut off the heads of the unbeliever. After the first 3 verses in chapter 47 define who the believer is and who the unbeliever is, verse 4 then says cut off those heads. So that is there. So I can see why many Muslims, the more they come back to the Quran and actually start reading it in English, they are coming up with a completely new narrative. It's not a new narrative though. This has been around since 1300s.
No, the Christian Church has experienced 1,400 years of persecution under Islamic domination.
And why is it that it's the same type of persecution and it's the same act? They're either cutting off our heads or they're crucifying us. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it comes from the Quran.
Chapter 5, verse 33.
But I'm not denying at all. I'm not denying the fact that the Quran has a violent narrative that a Muslim can chime into, and if they chime into it and decide that they're going to follow it, they end up becoming violent. But it's also evidently true that the vast majority of Muslims are not doing that.
Hold on.
The vast majority.
In Europe. But you've not been outside of Europe yet.
No, I haven't.
Be careful, because even Pew News would not have disagreed with that. Look at their statistics on the Clarion Project, which asks the exact same questions. When you ask something as simple as, should somebody be killed if they leave Islam? Look how many million, not just millions.
That's a question.
It was almost 70% of those who responded said yes.
And
so not in Europe, it was much smaller.
But there's also problems.
Your whole experience is in Europe. Go outside of Europe, and you'll find it's much greater than where you're giving lip service to.
I am not going to dispute statistics that I haven't seen. But what I am saying is, and again, it's coming back to the relationship between the church and Islam. It's not a debate about Islam. It's not a debate about what the Quran
But it's not just the church in Europe. Outside of Europe, it's a different debate.
Exactly. And this is the point that I'm trying to drive towards, is that within, if you've got one community that has a higher proportion of activists who are working to establish Sharia law, and then in the opposing community you have a very insipid sense of your own religious identity that is fundamentally disconnected from its history, because I think if Christians actually knew the history of the church under Islam, a lot of Christians that are currently trying to talk about this narrative of let's just pretend there's no differences and let's just roll along and get on together in some kind of hippie commune, if they actually incorporated the historical reality that the church has existed over 1400, experienced over 1400 years, they would take a different position to the question of whether we should engage with politics and prevent Sharia law being brought in and imposed.
I agree with you.
And it's the very fact that Christians don't have a theology that is giving rise to a political narrative in too much of the church that places us at such a disadvantage. And so you can see within a generation entire communities being transformed because one community is tapping into economics and politics to manipulate the direction that society moves in, where another community is just saying, well, it's all about theology and us in our little fellowship and we'll preach the gospel, but we'll not engage with these political questions or these sociological questions or these legal questions to try and move society into a different.
I would agree with you, Bob, and I can see we're segueing into the whole thing of whether or not we should use peace or violence in our narrative.
I'm not even talking about peace and violence. I'm talking about politics.
Politically speaking, I would agree with you. I would say that there's an enormous amount of ignorance in the church because we really separate church and state. It's there in the scriptures. Christ asked us to do so, and you're going to see much of the church has done just that. They reserve politics as almost something that's foreign to the church. What you're asking for, not many Christians would agree with.
Do you feel it's a mistake?
No, I feel correct in that. I would not use, and I would not go use the same tools that you use, but I agree with you that we are being so disengaged that we're not even aware of what's happening. And what we're up against is a religion that is very much involved in politics because they bring the church and state, or the mosque and state together.
Yeah.
So they start from the paradigm of mosque and state together. Therefore, every act they do is a religious act. So as they go to war, they're yelling Allahu Akbar. There's a reason why they're yelling Allahu Akbar, because this is a holy war. And for us, we have separated it so much that those two do not exist anymore.
And the political ideology that's dominating in the West, liberal progressive thought, separates the functions of the state, the institutions from the state, from any sense of a historical identity. And that is why it is literally dying in the West, because they see the state as simply a series of functional institutions separate from any historical narrative of identity. And so the liberal progressive state is quite happy to see itself taken over by a new ideology, because it doesn't see itself as seeking to preserve any historical identity.
Okay, on this I would disagree. I don't think they are happy to be taken over by another new ideology. They would be happy, when you said this about half an hour ago, to have everybody speaking the same language.
Yeah.
And that ideology that they think is the narrative for today, which is get along with your neighbor, love your enemy. This is what they're all saying is actually a Christian theology that they have borrowed, and they want everybody to be speaking from that playbook without realizing that which they are asking for is actually straight out of the gospel.
But it's not a Christian theology. It is a distortion of a Christian theology.
Okay, it is a distortion, but at its very base, the idea that you don't use violence against another, that you allow everybody to have equal, the freedom of speech, something as intrinsic as freedom of speech. The whole idea that everybody gets an equal vote, that men are equal to women, that men should not be beating their wives, that also the women can participate in government. Where do you think that all comes from? That doesn't come from.
It comes from a Christian worldview.
And it straight doesn't come from a Roman worldview, and it straight doesn't come from a Greek worldview, which all my atheist friends say that's where it derived. It comes strictly out of the gospel. Now, would you hear people say that today? No. They just assume that this is secular, that this is somehow was created when the Greeks engendered it back in 4th century BC. But they never looked at the Greek, or what Aristotle was saying and Plato was saying. That is uniquely a Christian idea. And I love the fact that they're saying it. I just wish they'd come home and give credit where credit is due. Now, for that
stop
reason,
distorting it.
this whole thing with Me Too, this whole Me Too movement, saying that men must not harass women. Where do you think that comes from? Well, look at the Greeks. Nowhere in the Greek in the Greek pantheon of all the even the plays, the Greek tragedies. There's women are being abused all the time. There was no idea of a man and a woman as equals in any Greek or
it's
Roman.
definitely not a Greek idea.
If the highest form of relationship in Roman and Greek times was between a man and a man, and if a man would have to have wives because they needed to have children and take care of them, their food. But if there was a relationship where the man and the woman, a man would fall in love with his wife, he was seen as mildly deranged. Where is this idea that women should not be harassed?
It's definitely the idea of an equality between the genders is something that emerges out of a Christian paradigm.
Galatians 3:28, but 1 Corinthians 7,
and
go
liberalism.
on and on with verse after verse that supports this idea that even our bodies are equal to each other.
Yes.
Ephesians 5:12, that a man 5:25, that a man should love his wife as Christ loved the church, even to the point of dying for her. I love it. I mean, that's what's lovely, is that this Me Too movement, even though I can see that it's going way beyond what it should be.
More credit than it deserves. It is a total distortion of a Christian worldview, because a Christian worldview is connected to the idea of historical continuum.
No, do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
It's an idea. Do you see where it's coming from?
Yeah, but it's a distortion of the Christian worldview, because the idea of the Christian community is its own entity, and we have to think about what is best for our community. And what is best for our community, history is conclusive. What is best for our community is no Sharia law, because where Sharia law has dominated, there are ancient churches that have managed to survive, like the Coptic Church, like the Ethiopian Church, like the Assyrian Church. Ultimately, they have been ground down and reduced and demonetized and demitized, and that I think what the church, what people like you and me need to do is we need to win a debate within the church. And that debate is, how do we respond to the challenge of Islam? Is it a challenge? Because there are some Christian leaders who are teaching from the pulpit that Islam is just another way to heaven, which is a complete distortion of the Christian worldview.
And I agree. Listen, we're not going to disagree on this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we will agree on the methodology of it, but I would absolutely, I'm right with you. I'm right with you on this, Bob, that there is a difficulty in the church concerning what is the means of getting to this point. And I would suggest that the difficulty I'm finding right now is even admitting that possibly that Islam is a problem. They would like to suggest that the problem exists over there, and it's a very small minority. Obama kept on saying this only represents 1%. Well, even you and I agree, this does not represent 1%.
Well, Pew research would indicate that it represents 3%, which is 40 million.
Where?
Pew Research in their study showed that
in Britain.
No. It was actually a global research.
On what question?
On the question of those who believe in using violence to achieve the end of establishing Sharia law.
My goodness, the Pew Research that I'm talking about is 243 million. So where's this 40 million you're coming up with?
Really? We'll have to share notes. You'll have to show me. Maybe
Absolutely.
yours
is much higher than what
there
you're
quoting. There might be a different.
So and what they did is they question after question. They didn't just talk about one question. They talked about should apostates be killed?
Yeah.
They asked should there be Sharia law imposed? They asked the question, should men be able to beat their wives? I mean, they went right down every one of the major questions. And it was fascinating to me that they were averaging around 200 to 243 million, one case 325 million
of a global survey.
So this 40 million, I'm not sure what. Maybe it's a different research. Maybe it's a different question. Nonetheless, but it's a lot more. And then they went by country by country by country. And in some countries, it was as high as 95% of respondents agreed.
Yeah. I can
like places like Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia and the more Muslim countries. So even country by country, but almost every one of the Muslim countries, it was over 50%.
I think in terms of addressing that challenge, I think that Christians need to be more strident in calling out Christophobia, and calling out the prejudice that is directed against Christians and why that prejudice and where that prejudice comes from. And we need to be more confident in standing up for ourselves. The church needs to become more strident in standing up against Christophobia, wherever it comes from. But that obviously is going to include the Muslim community and those parts of the Muslim community that buy into that Quranic narrative of make Christian dhimmi. But then it also, what needs to emerge is, and this is the only way I think to stop the process of Islamization, is that the church needs to rise up in confidence about a Christian identity as being what Europe needs, and seeing the narrative of a church triumphant. That actually the Christian community should be triumphant in Europe, should be triumphant globally. And that is when you start to buy into that kind of political narrative, you then have a means, a motivation by which you start engaging with these political, economic and social questions that can not only stop progressive Islamization, which is driven by this idea of Islam dominating, but also reverse it, and not just here, but even in Muslim countries as well.
I don't agree with you, but that's fine. You have your narrative on that. Keep with it.
Yeah.
Bob, we're going to disagree on that because I really do believe there needs to be a separation of church and state.
Yeah.
And I'm very clear. I'm very clear that it is when church and state have been brought together that the corruption usually comes in.
Yeah.
So, but that's the great thing about it, Bob. We're both brothers in Christ.
Amen.
And we both have a conviction that we want to see Islam stopped.
Yeah.
Politically, and I would say theologically, because of what Islam is doing to families, what it's doing to women, what it's doing to men, what it's doing to those who disagree. And that's why I want to bring him home.
Yeah.
I want to bring him home.
All right.
God bless you.
God bless you.